Hello, my name is Harrison, and today I'd like to share my progress in research supporting help in introductory computer science office hours for this quarter. So, to get started, let's just talk about kind of the bigger picture of what this situation and problem is. So, in the past several years, computer science programs in higher education have exploded in popularity and have seen incredible amounts of growth. And for many of these students who are entering these programs, they have had little or no experience with programming prior to university settings. And so, for many of them, their introductory computer science courses are their first experience programming, and as such, they are very novice programmers who are inevitably going to get stuck and need help to get unstuck so that they can actually make progress and learn on their own. However, it is very, very difficult for one instructor to be able to help often hundreds and hundreds of students. And in response to that, office hours run by undergraduate teaching assistants are a very popular, scalable venue for students to be able to receive help through help opportunities. And as such, office hours have kind of become this very key component to supporting novice programmers in introductory computer science courses as the main venue for them to receive help. So, during these office hours sessions, the ideal outcome is this: a student comes in with some kind of blocker or gap in their knowledge that they're having trouble overcoming, which is limiting their ability to progress, and they receive the help that they need from the TA that gives them that nudge so that they can overcome the problem on their own in the moment, and then in the future continue to be able to overcome similar types of problems later on. In order to make this happen, there are kind of two components. First, on the student's end, which is being able to ask for help in a way that is actually going to be able to lead to this type of help that will enable them to kind of bridge or fill knowledge gaps. So this is things like communicating the problem clearly, but also sharing what they currently do and do not understand and articulating their situation very clearly. On the other hand, we have the TA's end of things. This is more of a guiding role where the TA is first trying to help the student do those good things that they should do on their end by leading them towards what are called instrumental help-seeking skills. In addition to that, the TA wants to be able to provide help that is actually going to satisfy that desired outcome. So not providing too much help or just giving the answer away, but really giving students what they need in order to be able to solve problems on their own in the future. But the thing is that currently, when it comes to both ends, for students and TAs, neither of them tend to be very good at doing the thing that they quote unquote should do. This is not particularly surprising, however. For students, they are usually novices learning to program for the first time, and so they haven't developed these help-seeking skills that will allow them to really articulate and present their ideas and thinking well. And when it comes to the side of the TAs, especially in intro computer science courses, undergraduate TAs have had not very much experience when it comes to teaching and coaching students, and so they often lack a lot of the skills needed to be able to guide students and to be able to give them ideal kinds of help. Today we're going to be focusing on that second end of things with the side of TAs and the difficulties that they have when trying to create effective help situations during office hours. So there are a variety of ways that currently exist for supporting TAs. And most of these are encapsulated under TA training approaches. So for one, TAs can generally passively gain experience over time, but this is going to be the least effective way for them to actually build skills. Beyond that, some instructors give their TAs tips and guidelines that they can follow. Some TA programs have quarterly or annually kind of boot camp training sessions that happen at the beginning of courses to get TAs primed and get initial practice in doing things like hosting office hour sessions. And then finally, it's relatively common for TAs to have weekly either meetings or practice sessions with their course instructor to kind of go over how things have been going on a week-to-week basis and potentially get additional practice there. Current TA training requires a lot of resources on the end of pretty much everyone involved. For the TAs, it requires their additional time and for the school money to pay for that time. And on the instructor's end, pretty much all existing TA training approaches require facilitation and guidance and feedback from some kind of expert teacher. In addition to that, TAs are missing opportunities to get authentic practice during the moments when they're actually going to be doing what they want to be doing. So this poses an interesting opportunity, which is that TAs can actually probably become better TAs during the moments when they're applying their skills during the bulk of kind of where they're spending their time and have their responsibilities, i.e. office hour sessions. The thing is that there are a couple things that make it difficult for TAs to do this currently. For one, kind of definitionally, the reason why office hours sessions exist is to be scalable. And so CS course instructors are rarely, if ever, going to be present during office hour sessions in order to provide guidance to TAs or provide them feedback on how they're doing. Additionally, a lot of TAs may find in the heat of the moment that the different beliefs and orientations they've brought into their TA duty might actually conflict with the things that they probably should be doing or that a good TA might do in order to support instrumental help seeking. So then the question becomes, if we want to be able to leverage office hours, how do we help TAs overcome these challenges so that they can actually get high quality, authentic practice during office hours sessions? And so this is what my work did during the quarter, which is basically trying to iteratively design tools to support TAs in practicing to become better TAs during CS office hours. So this was done through kind of the iterative design and creation of different tools to help TAs practice more deliberately, as well as actually applying and testing those tools weekly with kind of a consistent set of 2 TAs over the course of the second half of the quarter. So coming into this was kind of my initial understanding of where the problem was at. So for one, I had done a need finding study where I'd actually sat in office hours and observed TAs and students and then interviewed both of them afterwards. And what I found is that on the TA side of things, TAs tend to not really help students in ways that are ideal towards that desired outcome that we want. But TAs do kind of express these intents or orientations that align with wanting to help students learn. And in past user tests I'd conducted, I found that often when just giving TAs better new strategies that they could try that they don't currently use, that it was difficult for them to apply several new strategies right in the moment. And furthermore, I saw hints at the idea that TAs might have certain ideas that are making it so that they don't want to or struggle to apply these types of new effective coaching strategies. And so it's important to not just kind of throw these are good things to do at a TA and hope that it sticks, but actually find a way to help TAs incrementally grow towards becoming better helpers so that they can acquire those skills over time. So let's quickly go over the 3 major iterations of the prototypes that I created this quarter. The first version was a set of worksheets to help TAs plan and reflect on their practice during office hours. So this came in 3 stages. First, prior to office hours, TAs were scaffolded to reflect on their current coaching ability and where they could improve. Then they selected an area of coaching that they wanted to focus on, provided from a set list, and received different tips that they should keep in mind during office hours to apply, as well as a rubric that they could use to grade themselves on during office hours to see how well they were actually applying those tips. Finally, after the office hours session, TAs were given a final worksheet where they reflected on how the office hours session went and what they could continue to do to improve. In the second iteration, TAs were given a different interface that was less cold, like a worksheet, a little bit more friendly, a little bit more fun, that followed a similar structure as the previous one, but had some slight changes. So for one, prior to the office hours session, instead of having TAs kind of get a general area of growth, TAs were guided to brainstorm more specific situations and think about what they do in those situations normally and strategies for things that they could do instead of those existing behaviors. Then, during the office hours session, TAs could check in at this kind of digital campfire in between helping students to kind of report on whether the situations they had anticipated actually arose and what they did during them. And then finally, similarly, TAs would reflect on how the office hours session went afterwards, as well as decide on what they wanted to focus on for the next week. Finally, in the third version, the same interface was used with some tweaks. However, an additional system was provided to create recommendations for strategies that TAs could use. So, prior to office hours, instead of having TAs generate their own situations and strategies, TAs were provided with suggested strategies based on their responses on what kinds of common situations or beliefs they faced. This was in addition, however, to TAs kind of doing some initial reflecting on their situations, but the ultimate situations that they picked were from a database. So right away, there were some key takeaways from the first version. For one, TAs had some awareness of what their actual coaching abilities were. They had ideas of where they were strong, where they were weak, what things they needed to improve on. And furthermore, we saw that when TAs had some more deliberateness behind what they were going to do during office hours, if they had thought through something that they were going to plan to practice, TAs were definitely felt encouraged to try and actually improve their coaching abilities during office hour sessions. However, TAs did not actually change their behaviors too much or really reach the desired outcomes that we were looking for because the feedback that TAs got in terms of the tips and suggestions were pretty general and not very actionable. Despite the fact that TAs said after the session that they had intent and focus on applying the tips. Furthermore, kind of similar to some of the things we had been thinking about coming into this, we began to see how TA's previous underlying beliefs could conflict with the specific area of focus that they were trying to practice. So, for example, one of the TAs was trying to let students work on their own more, but ended up providing a student with really excessive amounts of help after they encountered a bug in the student's code that they had a lot of trouble figuring out, which made them feel bad and feel like they needed to provide extra help to kind of compensate for not being able to realize what the bug was right away, as they usually didn't struggle to figure out students' problems. In the second version, we found further takeaways. For one, when asking TAs to actually generate their own situations and strategies to kind of look out for and apply, TAs were not the best at constructing them and would often come up with more non-specific, vague situations and vague strategies to apply on their own. Additionally, TAs could face situations where they kind of felt uncertain on really what they should do. And so that also made it difficult for them to generate different situations and strategies, in particular the strategies to respond to certain types of situations. And finally, we saw that during office hours sessions, it's very difficult for TAs to really use a tool for more than just kind of 15 seconds in between students because their main priority is ultimately to help students. And so a more elaborate interface like the one that we used at the time was going to be too heavy in that anything that would elicit information from TAs or collect things from them needed to be really, really lightweight. Finally, in the third version of the tool, we also had some pretty big takeaways. For one, after talking with TAs about kind of what influenced their behaviors and what they were thinking about when they took actions during office hours, there was a huge benefit to just taking time to consider what it meant to be a good TA. And this is not something that the tool actually tried to help scaffold or support. However, because I talked to the TAs after each office hours session, sometimes up to half an hour at a time, just to get them to reflect on how things went and ask them about TAing broadly, these types of questions and reflection emerged outside of the actual use of the tool. And this was pretty important because, for one, it helped give direction to TAs in thinking about where they actually wanted their TAing ability to go. And it also gave contrast to how the beliefs that they might have can conflict with that overall goal. So, talking about the TA I referenced earlier, they believe that a good TA would let students learn and apply things that they've learned on their own and practice on their own. And so when they found themselves feeling bad for not constantly directly helping students, they realized that that was something that they were going to need to grapple with in order to become what they had thought of as a really good TA. Additionally, there were some issues in how the actual underlying system for recommending strategies actually played out, in that different situations and strategies do not always have this direct mapping. That is, some type of situation does not always call for some type of strategy. And in this case, what happened was the system recommended the TA to kind of give students a next step for something to try on their own when they said they weren't sure what to do, instead of just kind of telling them what to do and guiding them through that. But it turned out that in one particular situation with the student had more fundamental conceptual gaps in their knowledge, which meant that even though there were clear next steps for them, they would not be able to execute on those until they actually clarified kind of their building blocks foundational knowledge first. So overall, here are kind of the big takeaways that I had from user testing this quarter, as well as kind of things that I'm thinking about moving forward. So for one, I think it's really revelatory to recognize that a big obstacle to TAs really being able to practice teaching and coaching strategies is that they really need to have a clear idea in their head of what it means to them to be a better TA, so that they're not defaulting to their previous behaviors, and so that they have a clear direction for what they actually are trying to go for when they want to be a better TA. Furthermore, I saw good indicators that the approach of having TAs think about particular situations and come up with actionable strategies they could apply in those situations actually seems to give TAs things that they can try out and test during office hours in order to practice. For both of these, there are still ways that they can be improved. For one, the first aspect was not accounted for at all in the designs I tested, and so actual characteristics to support this process of figuring out what it means for a TA to be a good TA need to be integrated. And on the system side of things, my approach for recommending strategies was pretty simple, basically having a direct mapping from certain strategies to certain situations. But this actual database and the selection criteria for picking strategies is probably going to be and need to be more elaborate than it currently is. Finally, there are kind of more general areas of interest that weren't directly informed from particular things that I saw during user testing, but would be good ideas to consider moving forward. For one, while I've been looking within the office hours setting, I guess at least across different weeks for a particular TA, there's definitely opportunities to actually expand and involve the broader TA ecosystem when it comes to a tool like this. So this can be connecting TAs to their TA peers, to their course instructors, thinking about how a tool like this can integrate with things like weekly TA meetings. Additionally, one thing that I was trying to test during the quarter, but didn't really have much time to focus on in particular, was actually rewarding TAs for using certain behaviors as they went through the tool. And so continuing to think about what types of actions TAs should be rewarded for and how can also be something that contributes to TAs feeling growth and motivation as they're using the tool. All right, well, that's everything I had for today. Thanks for watching.